Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. It's Sunday the 25th of September and we've just seen a significant period of mourning come to an end. In the week where we saw a mini budget from Quasi-Khartenk and Putin calling up 300,000 reservists, resulting in many of the younger Russian people fleeing the country. So let's start, Kev, with Truss and the Chancellor's changes, which really have seen more rabbits than Watership Down.
What was it you sent me? In Trust We Believe?
In Liz We Trust.
In Liz We Trust.
I mean, in reality, I think Liz Truss has obviously walked into probably one of the hardest jobs in the world. You know, such a legacy, a time of turmoil in the UK. You know, we're going through a massive energy crisis, come out of a pandemic. You know, that's a real poison chalice role, and there's some serious boots to fill. But I think ultimately, from the start, you know, she's only been in the position for a couple of weeks, and she's done the right thing by trying to address the issues that they're the burning question, aren't they? So, what are your thoughts on what she's done with the energy cap at 2,500 for households, and obviously this week she announced a business cap as well, which is only for 6 months, so it's obviously a much shorter period of time. But what do you think? Do you think she's handled that in the right way by getting on with that?
Yeah, I think she's handled it the right way by getting on with it, for sure. We need to take that insecurity out of the system, and that's what she's done. You know, whether it's right will only, I think, be known many years from now, to be honest, because, you know, storing up huge bills and huge situations. I mean, basically, we've just changed. Let's be honest, we've just changed the way of how the UK works economically. It's just changed by Truss and also the new Chancellor, because basically they believe wholeheartedly in the drip down effect. You know, this is going back to Thatcherism, basically, that I will give the people the money to decide what they're going to do with their money to try and create economic stimulus through this. And for a long time, we haven't really had that type of economics. Was it proved to be right in the past? Not really. Is it going to be proved to be right this time? Who knows? We're going to be in a lot of debt for sure as a country. I don't know. I mean, some of the things like bringing the 1% decrease from 20% to 19% for the tax bracket. Good thing, I think, but again, a costly thing.
I mean, it does beg the question, as you say, where's this money coming from? And that, you know, you rob the rich and give to the poor. But unfortunately, this feels it's the other way around, because ultimately it's the richer that are probably going to benefit more from the rules and from these, you know, from this latest mini budget. Now, let's just take a look at what's been announced. Now, we've had income tax, as you rightly say, there's cutting the basic rate of income tax to 19% from the 20%. That's from April 2023, which is obviously that's going to, they reckon 31 million people are going to be getting about £170 a year more in their wages because of that. So that's going to help, you know, a large number of people out. There's a 45% higher rate of income tax was going to be introduced. That has actually been abolished. So that's obviously going to help the richer side, that, you know, the probably less than 1%. And then there's going to be just a single higher rate of income tax of 40% from April next year. National insurance has been an interesting one. That's seen a reverse. You know, that people have been paying an extra 1.25p in the pound, and that was obviously reversed from the 6th of November. So that's obviously good news. Corporation tax is a big one, which you know, you think of it, was due to increase from 19% to 25% in April 2023. So that's a really good one, encouraging small businesses to grow really, and not putting the you know, kibosh on that. So I think that's a real positive. The big one that's going to cause a lot of consternation, I think, is going to be the bankers' bonuses. There was going to be rules introduced in which bankers' bonuses were going to be capped, but they're going to be scrapped now, and there's going to be a package of regulatory reforms to be set out later in the autumn. So what are your thoughts on let's say, Liz Truss helping the bankers out with bonuses?
Well, the first point that you made, 2.25% pay increase, basically is what Joe Blogg's worker who works for a company is going to be getting by April next year. 1.25% now, and then another 1% when the interest rate goes down. So if you earn 40, 50,000 pounds a year, you're going to probably be 2.25% better off. So that's a fairly significant amount. That's £1,000 or more a year, £100 a month. So, on your 40, 50,000 pound wage. So that's going to help, isn't it? The bankers, well, okay, let's throw all the hate at the bankers because they really did mess up in the past. But the reality of the situation is we're not in Europe anymore. Hello, Brexit happened. We left. Okay. Yeah. So we have to make our financial system more like the US and Asia. Otherwise, we're not going to have one. Yeah. Okay. So the bankers are not going to be here. Okay. Yeah. They'll be in the US or they'll be in Asia, and a small amount will be in Europe, but that's it. So I actually think, not that they didn't have any choice, but it's politically not very helpful. But the reality of the situation is a huge amount of the UK's income tax take is from these big banks and from these big bank employees. They're the ones paying the 40% tax and huge amounts of it. So I am not convinced it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. Politically, it's a bomb, isn't it? And people are going to be like, oh, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? But actually, economics works in this way. So,
Yeah, you're right. And it is absolutely is down to encourage, big corporations and big bankers to actually come back to the city and say, look, we're not penalizing you. There is no cap. You can earn what you need to based on performance or, whatever it is that they do. So I think it is the right decision. Obviously, it is going to cause some controversy, but ultimately, if it stimulates the economy and growth, then I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like we're going down the road here that if you've got a job, they want you to stay with that job, and we're going to make it more beneficial for you to have that job. What have we had in the past where we've had literally millions of people who basically benefits have seen the better deal, and in a lot of ways that's been true for decades. And we've got to move away from that. And that's a very Tory idea. But we do have to move away from that, because going forward, I'm not just talking about the UK now, I'm talking about the world. The world is in an aging population, especially in the West. And it can't afford to keep just paying and paying and paying for all these situations. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the pension age keeps going up, because we can't afford to keep paying for all of these people. So even if they have paid in, the reality is you paid your national insurance, you should be able to get your pension. But the reality is, as the national insurance was going in, it was paying the pensioners of the day. There's no big pot of money to pay the pensioners every day. We have to pay it from money that comes in. Yeah. So, it's a big economic discussion and argument, but I feel like, maybe things are going to change, and that change will hopefully be positive and start sparking some, if you like, the Tories sold us this thing on Brexit that, the economy would thrive and we would get lots of new businesses going and stuff like that. Well, that hasn't happened because of Corona and all those other things. But hopefully this will start the momentum that people will, start to create their own businesses and start to be entrepreneurs, because that's what the UK has always been. We've been entrepreneurs for the rest of the world.
Moving on to Russia, I mean, without going too political on everything, what are your thoughts on, obviously, the announcement Putin gave his talk? It's basically calling up 300,000 reservists. Obviously, there was an age limit on that. So what are your thoughts? I mean, there's been a massive exodus for people trying to get on flights into Finland. Quite a lot of the countries that border, Estonia and Latvia have closed the borders off from Monday evening. I mean, do you think this is, and obviously we've seen that there's going to be there are referendums ongoing, voting in the east, in the Donbass region, of whether they want to remain as a Ukrainian or whether they will remain as Russian territory. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think Putin's being backed into a corner, or do you think this signals some sort of resolution?
I think Putin has been backed into a corner already. I don't think it's a case of he is being backed into a corner. he just didn't see the response of the rest of the world, I think, to what he's done. And I was reading some articles that actually internally in Russia, before this all happened, he was being backed into a corner as well, that he had to take some action because the media and the press were painting Ukraine as this neo-Nazi situation, which I think is blatantly not true, but it is what it is. I think he's, with all this call up and the nuclear threat and everything else, I think he's just paying a big bluff, because basically he wants to negotiate now, and by threatening those things, people are hopefully going to come to the negotiation table quicker. I think the Turkish president came out and said that he wants this to end, or Putin wants this to end.
And there was another interesting development where they released 5 British hostages. I think 3 or 4 of them were actually fighting in the Ukraine as Ukrainian residents who were already living in the Ukraine with perhaps a Ukrainian wife. Or spouse, and ultimately they were already serving in the kind of like the territorial army. So they've actually been released in a deal that was brokered by the Saudis, which seems absolutely bizarre to say the least. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, again, I think things are being put in place, aren't they, or in position. I think the press have taken that bit out of it, but actually it was a release of a lot of prisoners both ways. I think it just so happened that 5 of them were Brits, I think. Yeah, I'm more interested. I mean, the Georgian border is absolutely stuffed at the minute. All these people trying to drive across. They don't need a visa from Russia to go into Georgia. So, the men...
Do you think we're starting to
families are fleeing because they don't want to fight?
Exactly. Do you think we're starting to see the fear element coming into play in Russia, which will ultimately... When people are fearful and they're less, they're easier to control in a way, but it's still then it's easier to spark some sort of revolution. Or, I mean, we've already seen protesting in the larger cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. Do you think that we could see some sort of coup or revolution where the mothers and fathers and family members who don't want to see the younger generation, who are just reservists, pulled into something that where they're seeing them being effectively used as cannon fodder? That would be the ultimate thing, isn't it? That seems one of the ways of the people power and the revolution and overthrowing of the Kremlin. But do you think that's pie in the sky?
I don't know. It has to be there has to be some internal issues, I think, for this all to be resolved as well. So they obviously exist. Even all of his oligarchs that are around him, I think the vast majority of them don't agree with him. Yeah. But if they've spoken out, they've been dealt with, haven't they? And by all accounts, a lot of the army guys who have obviously voiced disapproval of what's been happening have basically been shot dead. So, or it seems to have been quietened in some way. So,
I think that we'd see a situation where one man can have this vision of what he wants to do, and he's destroying a country, and he wants effectively to eradicate the country from existence, almost like in a Hitler-esque type movement. Did you ever think we'd ever see this amount of control from one man?
Yeah, I think it's a natural human scenario, isn't it? It happens in much smaller countries all over the world that don't have as dramatic impact as other places. You only have to go to Africa.
The Mugabe type situation.
Mugabe scenario. You've got the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a bit of a joke in its own name, isn't it? It's not democratic at all. So those places don't foster as much attention, and therefore don't cause the world as big a problem. So they just carry on.
Well, they're not nuclear powers as well, so that they kind of don't have that weight behind them as well. So it's kind of a fear factor. But all right, well, I mean, we've talked about the energy crisis. I mean, what about the future of the energy? We've seen, we've seen different companies coming online. We've seen North Sea, a bit of a resurgence in that. We've seen the windfall tax. We've seen Liz Truss bringing back fracking, which is another really contentious subject. That's all been passed by the looks of things. So we're encouraging the homegrown energy companies, as I say, the exploration side of things is all being kind of like given tax relief. So Brough has closed, as we've mentioned on previous podcasts when we had Malky on. We can look to other countries around the UK as well for doing this.
Yeah, No, we've got big problems in Ireland, and I mean we're shipping gas to them. So where does it all stop? So and they've got their own gas. This is the joke about it. Or even if they haven't got their own gas, they can ship their own gas. Yeah. So yeah, it's a crazy situation. Do you know anyone who knows anything about that?
Well, we've got Paul Griffiths on the call, Executive Chairman of Predator Oil and Gas. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Appreciate this is my first time on, so looking forward to it.
Good, yeah. As you say, being this is your first appearance on the show, do you want to just give the listeners a brief introduction as to what Predator does?
Yeah, Predator is a standard list company, came onto the market in May 2018 with a very low initial market cap around about 2.8 million sterling. We have projects. Initially, we had the CO2 enhanced oil recovery project in Trinidad, plus some successor authorizations, licenses in Ireland. Since that time, we've added Morocco, which is the key to the future success of the company. And we've also expanded into an LNG project in Ireland. So we are on 3 continents. We have a strong footprint at government level in all 3 continents and strategic value, if you like, in those 3 continents in terms of CO2, EOR, LNG, and gas in Morocco.
So I saw just this week there was news that the Mag Mell FSRU project concept for Ireland was validated, where the company notes that the floating storage and regasification units are now being considered as options for the import of liquefied natural gas to support security of energy supply. Do you want to talk us through what this means for the Irish project and the company?
Well, I think a little bit of background, first of all, is that we first initiated this project ourselves internally in 2020. Presented it to the Irish government and the DEC in 2020, were kind of stonewalled by the Eamon Ryan, the Green Party minister, for 2.5 years. We have spent the last 6 months on a PR exercise, including a white paper, which is distributed to all stakeholders and the Irish government. And finally, the fruits of that labour, if you like, issued in release of the Security of Energy Supply report on Monday, which demonstrated that LNG was on the table, but most importantly, not onshore LNG, basically FSRU vessels, which we had been promoting since 2020, which allow you to process an LNG offshore and deliver it into gas. And the point I would make is Mag Mell, which is an Irish mythical kingdom, very appropriate for the Green Party, I think. Mag Mell is the only project in Ireland which is an FSRU offshore project. Shannon has been killed off, if you like, initially by the Security of Supply Review. The other project looks at a jetty solution in the harbour of Cork, and that was terminated in 2021, would have to be resurrected. I would remind people of the Bantry Bay disaster in the early 1980s when a tanker blew up in the jetty alongside Bantry Bay. So ours is the only offshore, absolutely safe, environmentally friendly solution, and we have absolute emphatic ownership of that project. We have the partners in terms of Hogue LNG collaborating on the project, and we have the downstream marketeer of the gas, which is one of Ireland's largest companies. And we have built that up as a management team over 2.5 years, and now we're in the pivotal position to try and drive it through to commercialization.
So this is in the southeast of Ireland, yes?
Yeah, it's about 5 or 6 kilometres east of the old Kinsale gas field. Our battle at present is to ensure that the minister doesn't decommission the Kinsale pipeline. He's decommissioned the platforms, but the Kinsale pipeline needs to remain in place. It's a vital piece of gas infrastructure in which gas can be imported directly into the grid from an LNG ship, regasification vessel, with no new infrastructure investment. So when he talks about the high cost of investment in LNG, he is not understanding that this option is a low cost investment deliverable within 2 years within the climate change policy guidelines of the government. His other solution is not deliverable in that time framework.
I mean, it seems that in this current energy crisis now, this with the closure of, I think it was the Rough storage facility, this is a really good time to be providing this sort of solution, right, Paul?
That has been the argument for the last 6 months. We pushed very hard. In fact, it's the argument I put forward in 2016, just before Brexit, in the Irish Examiner, that Ireland should not be relying on a single source of gas from the United Kingdom post-Brexit. Corrib is winding down, as you know, over the last 5 or 6 years. The ban on new exploration means there's no new indigenous gas being found. There are 3 undeveloped gas fields in the Celtic Sea as we speak. There are 3 undeveloped gas storage facilities in the Celtic Sea as we speak, but those are currently being ignored in favour of long-term solutions for renewable energy and hydrogen, which are years down the road. And Ireland is solely dependent then on the generosity of the United Kingdom for gas storage and for the movement of gas into Ireland. So any political shock that occurs is going to be catastrophic for Ireland in terms of blackouts, lack of investment, because you haven't got secure energy supply. So it's a vital strategic issue.
And I think it should also be noted, if I remember rightly, that the Mag Mell has been independently confirmed as being capable of satisfying circa 45% of the severe weather peak display, of any peak day gas deficiencies.
Absolutely. All it's doing is reusing the original Kinsale pipeline, which was providing gas from the Kinsale gas field at peak times of 300 million cubic feet a day, and injecting that directly into the Irish grid. So all Mag Mell does is reproduce that volume of gas over a period of 365 days a year. There might be 1 or 2 days for operational downtime. That's why you need some storage capability. But it reproduces Kinsale. And Kinsale drove the Irish economy in 1978, drove the development of gas infrastructure, and created what I would see was the modern Irish economic state. And all we're trying to do is reinforce that and make sure that it keeps growing, keeps developing, based on having gas as a backup to renewable energy.
So this comes as LNG and then is pumped onto your LNG vessel?
It's pumped into the LNG vessel as LNG. It then moves to Ireland and then it's regasified. So it's heated up and turned back into gas and then injected directly in the pipeline subsea offshore, with just a simple mooring buoy that is lifted up, and that's attached with a flexible hose to the end of the Kinsale pipeline. So very, very simple concept in terms of infrastructure. And the infrastructure we've designed, the buoy system we've designed, is suitable for the Celtic Sea weather conditions.
So how does Predator benefit from this? What's the financial scenario of the pumping? A
very good question, and we've thought this through over a couple of years, and it's more to do with the fact that LNG terminal owners are basically, it's a tolling facility. So what we would look at is that we own the rights to the FSRU project. We deal with the Commission for Regulation and Utilities to get the LNG import license, which you can't import LNG into Ireland without that license. We effectively run the liaison with the regulatory process. We understand the facilities, the Kinsale pipeline, because we produced gas in the past through that pipeline. So we would be looking at a tolling fee, which would be a percentage of the total value of the throughput of gas. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that tolling fee is going to be, because that's a commercial negotiation. But if you look at LNG terminals in the UK and other places around the world, you'll get a fairly good idea what the percentage would be of the throughput. And of course, at current gas prices, that is a huge amount of value. And that is what we're looking at, basically being, if you think of it, it'd be like owning the M50 toll on the Dublin Ring Road. Every time someone's through, we collect a toll.
Yeah, they were still chasing me for a toll 6 years ago. Because I went down from the north to the south and back up again. I didn't realize I had to pay it. So that's good. So is the ship ready? Or is it a case of you have to order this, build it? What's the situation?
The situation is until that security of supply report came out, nobody can place orders for vessels or take vessels that might or might not become available off contract. Because this is a relatively small amount of LNG compared to some of the projects around Europe and the world. Smaller, older vessels would be suitable. And there is also the ability to convert tankers or even build a new vessel. So we're looking at 2 years to have this all in place and commissioned. Now, you might say, well, that's not going to make any difference in the short term. But the argument is that the short term is like a window to the medium and long term. Gas is going to be needed as a backup to renewables. If you don't have gas, you're not going to have security of energy supply. Gas will drive the price of electricity, not wind, because if you have gas at times when the wind doesn't blow, that sets the price. And that's why you've seen just recently electricity prices go up. The price of wind hasn't come down, but the price of wind energy has gone up because it's matching the competitive market of gas-fired power generation electricity. So that's what you're always going to be faced with. So 2024-25 winter is not a long way off. And this will provide security for 5, 10, 15 years. And once it's finished, you can just take it away. There's no big decommissioning costs, unlike an onshore facility.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing was that it was always inevitable that we had to go through a transition phase in this situation. But yet the green agenda seemed to have said, no, we don't need any transition. We'll just take this car and we'll jump to this car, literally in terms of, combustion engine to electric engine, which was never feasible from many points of view, partially because we don't have the resources, especially the resources to make a lot of these electric things that are required, especially in the battery side of things. And also now that Putin and the Ukraine situation debacle has basically shut the pipelines. So the security of energy from the UK to Ireland has got to be put into question, because the UK is not going to be exporting when it needs it itself in this situation. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's agreements in place already, but they're not going to be sticking if this continuation happens.
Well, there are agreements in place, legally binding long-term agreements, just simply as similar to the protocol, Northern Ireland Protocol Agreement. So I think when push comes to shove and there's a shortage of gas in the UK, are you going to tell your voters that you're going to use some of that gas to help dear old Ireland out? Or are you going to be cognizant of the fact that it's your voters that are going to re-elect you, not the Irish Dáil? So there will be strains and stresses developing in a gas shortage situation. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Ireland is exposed at the end of the pipeline, and the last people to receive gas from the European Norwegian network. And there's a fallacy two fallacies actually. Firstly, that the gas all comes from Norway. Yes, that's true. But when you get into the grid in the UK, there are gas swaps agreements, for example. So your gas to Ireland might come from another source if the sellers swap the gas out. And there's also a fallacy that all LNG uses fracked gas, which was a lie, basically, produced by the Green Party in the early days of LNG. And the other factor is they can't, with their hand on their heart, say that there's no fracked gas coming through the interconnector, because there's LNG imported to the UK, that gets swapped around the grid, so they cannot say that there is no fracked gas coming through the interconnector. So I agree 100% with the green energy transition and climate change, but you're absolutely right. There was no provision for energy transition. It was ideologically driven initially, then it became taken up by a number of other people, but none of them understood, because they weren't in the industry, they didn't understand any of the industry, none of them understood the concept of the energy transition and the impact of falling off a cliff face if energy prices rose. And Putin has shown exactly what happens when gas prices increase due to lack of supply. Imagine if the green agenda had been rolled out prematurely, cutting gas supply, and prices have gone up the same way as it has been driven by the Ukraine-Russia war. Imagine then what people would be saying. And governments come and go, but gas won't. Gas is continuous now for many years to come, a fact of life. And for the governments right now, the problem is, what has this done? This has driven effectively an energy crisis, a cost of living spiral, inflation, economic downturn, loss of jobs, loss of investment. That could all have happened if, particularly in Ireland, if the green energy policy had just been rolled out with no recognition of the value of gas. And the fact that the department and the minister absolutely refused for 2.5 years to engage on the gas issue with us and with others, for example, Barry Rowe, just shows how completely out of touch they are with reality and the energy transition.
So the position now is that you have the go-ahead to get this sorted out, or we're just still in the stages of them accepting this?
This is the process where you go through stages. The regulatory process is never going to be one which materializes just like that. So we take the view that for the next 2 years until commissioning, hopefully in 2024 and 25, there are various steps to go through. And these will be painful, complex, regulatory, but the result will justify the effort and the time, as we've showed over the last 2.5 years. So we're prepared to put that effort in, but make no mistake whatsoever. Our focus as a company is Moroccan and Moroccan gas, not going through this process of LNG. LNG offers us huge upside down the road, but it's not the driver in the next 6 or 9 months. That's Moroccan gas.
Your current market cap is £30 million or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate a profit of £30 million per annum, or more or less, from this LNG project, if and when it comes to fruition in 2 years' time?
From the LNG project, yes, in 2 years' time. In fact, far more than that. But in terms of the immediate anticipation of profit, that will come from the compressed natural gas initial development in Morocco, which we hope to kick off at the beginning of next year, late this year, beginning of next year, starting that process after drilling MOU2. That is much, much more profitable for us and much, much more near term than the LNG. So the point I'd stress to everybody, the listeners, is that don't get fixated by LNG. That's some growth potential down the road in a couple of years. But in the short term, it's Moroccan gas that will drive the value and drive the revenues.
You did very well to avoid that question, Paul. Well done, you're a politician. Okay,
I think I would answer that on the basis that you only have to look at the numbers and look at what gas generates in profit in Morocco for small volumes to realize that I could have said, well, I think you're being very pessimistic and negative by saying 30 million.
So before we delve too deep into Morocco, should we just talk over the report and interim financial highlights that I believe were released yesterday or this week?
Yeah.
The cash balance looks good. I mean, do you want to just talk us through some of those financial highlights?
Yeah, I think there are only a few points I'd make because everybody has read our interims and accounting. We always get our interims and financial annual reports out on time before the end of grace period that was given everybody after COVID, which will disappear next year. So I think the main points is that we've reduced our losses despite increasing our activity over the 6 months with the LNG and planning for Morocco. We've also reduced our administration expenses, which we're a very small team. We don't have any employees. We prefer to do all the work ourselves, including booking our own flights, our hotels, etc. So we don't have any excess baggage, and because that we have a lean, mean operating overhead compared to most companies of our size on AIM or the standard list. We've also managed to increase our cash. Of course, we've had a placing and we've had a subsequent placing post the interim results. The value in that, it means we are now fully funded 100% from Moroccan drilling and testing, and bearing in mind we have 100% of that well. Obviously, ONEMA carried, the state carried for 25%, but we pay 100% during exploration. That's a great position to be in. So some people have asked us why we didn't farm out. Well, why would we farm out and lose a significant portion of project value and control of the project and potential operatorship for the sake of $3.5 million on drilling a well for the reward? So we also have no debt, which is crucial and always crucial. We toyed. Well, I won't say we toyed, we played with a convertible loan in 2019, and that was necessary because we had a small market cap and we had to secure the Moroccan license with a bank guarantee. And we dropped that and paid it off very quickly because it was drag on share price. And we're not going back in that direction anywhere near time soon, or perhaps even ever, hopefully. So we also refreshed the board. I'm always keen to refresh elements of the board every so often, except myself, of course, as the largest shareholder. I'm happy to be refreshed at any time if people don't think I'm delivering for shareholders. I'm delivering for myself as a shareholder. But I think it's necessary that all board members are periodically realigned with shareholders and the company's interests, even the NEDs. The NEDs have an important job, but at the end of the day, in a small cap, the most important job is trying to deliver value for shareholders. We may not always be successful, and we won't always be successful, but sure as hell we make a good try at it.
Looking now to Morocco, where it seems to be this is where the main asset is, and obviously we discussed before we hit the record button about other companies in the vicinity. Sound Energy was mentioned, SDX, etc. But do you want to just talk us through MOU1 and MOU2 and what the plans are and where we are now in terms of moving them in, hopefully, into commercialization?
First of all, I've been involved in Morocco since 2006 as Ireland Oil and Gas, as far as oil and gas, both offshore and onshore. And in 2011, I selected Griffiths, which was called Murada then, and applied for it then, were bought out by Fastnet because our listing failed on AIM due to the French elections. So we didn't close the placing. We lost about a week before we closed the placing. It was always my view that Murada, or Griffiths as it now is, was a great exploration license. It hadn't been drilled for nearly 30 or 40 years. And you just have to trust the judgment of a geoscientist that if you see an opportunity like that from a science point of view, and you have great commercial conditions in Morocco, then it has to be a target for you. There's nothing like it I've seen in 30 or 40 years in the business in terms of having all the metrics that you need for a success. So we drilled MOU1 last year. And what you have to remember is we created that operatorship from scratch. We don't use service companies. We use our own in-house consultants. There was 3 of us that ran the program. I designed the well, and bearing in mind no well had been drilled here before. We had some good background information in the past on the SDX wells and kind of knew what to expect over the last 3 or 4 years. But we drilled that well in 15 days. We reached our primary target, which was a seismic bright spot. The well was very difficult to drill because we had to use very high mud weights. At the time, we didn't understand the high mud weights, why they were so high. They were higher than anything seen in the RAB and or in GRF1. So it was a bit of a mystery. But also the problem was the sands in the target sands are unconsolidated. So if you imagine grains of sand being caught up in a gas vortex in the drilling mud, it's like, as I said before, you got a vegan smoothie or something. So very hard to see, what you got from the well site geologist. The other thing we found out after the well, that the target that we thought was going to be a shallow target ended up being the deep, big fan target, the Muluya MOU4 fan that we were targeting for the next well. So we just caught the edge of it. So if you imagine going down to the beach, going far enough out to a pile of mud underwater with some thin sands, very, very porous permeable sands, that's kind of where we were. Now we want to go back onto the beach where all the nice big sands are in MOU2. So we completed that well for testing, because we had strong gas shows. And also because the conventional logs, we knew we had some gas, but they were very, very difficult to interpret because of the mud weight. So we used NewTek in Houston 2 or 3 months later to look at the logs. They identified several zones for testing and perforating, which is why we had previously completed the well. But the perforating design is very important. We have to use bigger guns and they have to be directed in different directions, etc. So that's why we didn't rush out and perforate the well, because we had to understand, what we had. Subsequently, we completed the desktop studies and we found another shallow zone with 2 or 3 potential gas sands that were washed out, which are going to add to the perforating program. So hand on heart, we don't know whether MOU1 will flow 2 million a day or 15 million a day. We know confident it will flow, but we don't know what sort of rate. It depends on whether all the zones flow. So based on that, MOU1 set up, the giant MOU4 fan. So we touched the edge of it. We've got a 30 square kilometer fan effectively now to appraise. And our studies showed after the well that we can drill a well in the axis of the fan. We're potentially up to 168 meters of nice sand in the core of the fan. A bit like drilling Anchois-1, for example, where they drilled it in the axis of the fan, had a lot of sand. We're in the same position for MOU2. And the reason why we think it was so overpressured is because we're actually having to run a safety case for now for a 1,000-foot gas column. 10% chance that it could be, but if that comes in, then we have to be prepared, in the drilling to make sure we can handle the pressures. So we're very, very comfortable and excited by MOU2 based on everything we've done, but it was MOU1 that unlocked the potential. Without that, we would never have realized the potential of MOU2.
So I believe that the MO2 well pad construction was due to commence in something like July on the last update. How are things going there?
We're a bit behind on that because the permitting is actually just been approved this week. It took longer than that, than we anticipated, and there are reasons for that. It's out of our control. But we're ready now with the permitting. We should complete in the next few days, and we'll be ready to effectively construct the site.
Sure. So obviously the naming convention's interesting. The MOU1 and MOU2 and MOU4 also meaning Memorandum of Understanding, which I believe that you've also discussed in the past for gas sales agreements and leasing of the CNG.
Yeah.
How are things going there, Paul?
I should say that's a pure coincidence. It's the geography. Hallelujah is the river valley. On the basis of the potential gas sales, obviously everybody's really hanging on for the flow test results. We don't necessarily ourselves want to, and maybe nobody will, sign up anything before those test results are out, simply because we have a base case of maybe less than 5 million cubic feet a day for compressed natural gas to industry. And that doesn't sound much, but the maximum SDX produced in the Rab Basin was 8 million a day to industry and made a lot of money. So we believe that we're going to be in the range of somewhere up to 50 million a day after testing, depending on the results of MOU2. So that kind of colors the gas sales contracts because there are only certain current suppliers who could take even a fraction of that volume. And there would be new industries who would love to get their hands on some of that volume. So we're not in a rush. Everything's set up. Talks have been held, but we can press the button immediately after the test results from a position of strength and pick and choose which parties initially will get the gas.
Sure. And then presumably after that, once you've proven up, as you say, the flow testing, and that there would then be discussions potentially for gas sales, first sales would be the next step after that.
Yeah, I think the first step after, with 2 wells, MOU1 and MOU2 tested, we will have enough for a compressed natural gas development, because you always have to have one spare well if one goes down, for example, for a workover. So we're very happy that we can press the trigger, if you like, on a CNG development immediately after the test results become public knowledge, obviously analysed for a week or so. So that part of it is the easy part. At that time, we will be able to determine what we can sell to industry, and we'll start off with a very low rate because we don't want to be in a position to have to hedge gas if we can't deliver. But we think we can scale that up to, certainly initially we'll be looking at 10 million a day. That's our target. And you're going to see from our recent presentations what value that would create. And just to put it in perspective, that's 25% more than the Rab Basin produced at any time in its 20 or 30 year history. So it's very important to understand scale and value. Yes, we want to create the big value by upscaling to 50 million a day and supplying most of easy Moroccan industrial. But initially, it's about getting revenues as quickly as possible.
Tell us just a little bit about the gas market in Morocco, because it's quite unusual compared to other countries, I think.
Gas market in Morocco has always been quite tiny. It's split into two kind of sectors. There's gas to power, which takes probably up to 100 million cubic feet a day, but you have to sell to the state for gas to power because the state owns the power generators. That means you're hostage to gas price. You'll never get the same gas price as selling to private industry. So we don't want to sell gas to power. Someone can do that in the long term when we have much more gas discovered, potentially a bigger partner to develop it. Gas to power, fine. But what we're targeting is the industrial market. And the industrial market currently is not easily supplied because the gas infrastructure in Morocco, despite having the Maghreb gas pipeline to Europe running through it, it hasn't diversified other than one or two little pipelines to key industrial centers. And because the industry is scattered all over the place, it costs a huge amount of money to invest in infrastructure to supply each individual user. They therefore mainly use imported fuel oil and LPG, etc., which is priced much more highly than gas, even before the current energy crisis. So converting to gas saves them money if you give it to them at an affordable price, and also allows them to go green more quickly because gas is greener than fuel oil and LPG. So that has a benefit there too. The market probably is up to 50 million a day. The current initial market would be up to 10, 20 million a day easily. So that fits nicely with a Guernsey initial development. In terms of exporting to Europe, you might ask yourself, well, this wonderful gas pipeline links Morocco to Europe. Morocco took ownership last year. And of course, at that time, Algeria cut off the gas to Morocco for all kinds of reasons. So Morocco currently imports gas from Spain through the gas pipeline. But ultimately, of course, Morocco could be a significant contributor to the European energy crisis. Yes, they've talked about a Nigerian pipeline and MOUs have been signed, but that is years and years away from helping Europe out. But more gas in Morocco, excess gas in Morocco, could help Europe out. Kind of two different elements to the gas market. Why it's attractive is gas prices. Obviously, even before the energy crisis, $11 to $12 an MCF was achievable in the gas market. We're targeting $16 an MCF. That's low compared to current gas prices. But the point is, you have to make gas affordable for people to use it. If we make it affordable, Moroccan industry and potteries and steel and other can compete with European commodities because their energy costs will be cheaper. So there's lots of benefits in kind of taking a less selfish view of gas prices. So I would make the final point is that obviously the gas market is also driven by the very low tax regime, no corporation tax for 10 years and 5% gas royalty after you produce 10.6 BCF of gas. Best terms you'll ever get for gas in virtually the whole world, as far as I know.
Okay, and what is the potential for this field? How many sort of BCFs do you think are in this field?
We have a CPR that gives us 295 BCF recoverable in the P50 case and 708 BCF recoverable in the P10 case. So that's a hell of a lot of gas. For a CNG market. And the upside case is based on finding more reservoir sand, thicker reservoir sands, and we think we're targeting that MOU to 168 meters. What we have here is far more than we need for a CNG development. Even if we were producing 50 million a day, that's only about 18 BCF a year that we're using up. So clearly, there's going to be a lot more gas available than simply the CNG market. And that's where we can sell that excess gas eventually to someone who wants to take it to gas to power, not us. We don't want to be involved in the long-term development, or a trading company, or a commodities company, or a farming that wants to develop gas to power, and a bigger company that can look at the longer term and the longer term margins that will be attractive for them. I should also say that embarrassingly, we have another prospect a few kilometers away, which original CPR gave us, I can't even remember what it gave us now. I think it was about 324 BCF, but don't quote me now. You need to go back to the original CPR recoverable, and several other gas prospects in this same play. So it's not as if, we're looking at one well wonders here. There's lots and lots of running room here in a license that is equivalent in size to 60 North Sea blocks. Just remember that.
The SLR CPR gave an unrisked MPV of about $592 million from memory. And that was just on MOU2 commerciality alone. So that it just shows you how vast this potential, the whole project could be.
Yeah, I think if you go back to that report, you will see that there was a 25% risking based not on finding the gas, but on chance of commercial development based on gas to power. So they used a lower gas price, took a longer time framework to get to gas to power, and still came up with $592 million NPV. Yeah, great. These things are attractive for sure, but you have to remember they also showed what the value for CNG could be with lower operating costs, higher gas price. I think they used 11 to 12, if I remember rightly, whereas we're using 16 now, quite rightly, in a different climate. But, I wouldn't get hooked into the numbers. All it's demonstrating is the massive upside in a success case per BCF. And that's not surprising when you look at the low operating costs, the low drilling costs, the low capital development costs, and low taxation, and also the high gas price. So you don't have to be a brain surgeon or an analyst or a forensic expert to realize the scale of the opportunity, if not the absolute precise numbers. It's not something that's going to shift between 1 and 10. It's something that is going to be 50 to 100. That's how I would look at it.
And the interesting thing as well is this is going to change the economics of Moroccan industry for sure. It's going to make them very competitive, and this will obviously help the country and probably drive demand for the gas to be even higher.
Well, we could take a selfish, arrogant attitude that we want to get as much profit for our shareholders as possible, as quickly as possible. That's not the way we work. We try to take a step back. It was a bit like falling off a cliff face for the Green Party. We're a bit like taking a step back and understand. I've worked in Morocco for 16 years now, have a very good relationship with everybody at every level. And the thing you must understand, this is Moroccan gas. It's not our gas. It's not shareholders' gas. It's Moroccan gas. So we have to work with Morocco to deliver value for us, but also show and demonstrate how important it is for Moroccan industry to get the right kind of deal. And by dealing with private industry, it allows us a little bit of flexibility to cut the right kind of deals. It's win-win all around. On him, we'll get 25% of revenues. There will be a taxation eventually, the royalty, but Moroccan industry will become highly competitive again with a secure supply of gas. Wouldn't the UK, wouldn't Europe, wouldn't Ireland like to be in that position? Well, Morocco can beat them all. Moroccan could be in that position in 6 months' time. And that's the prize for everybody.
And you could be helping Spain a great deal as well, because it's very close, obviously. The pipeline's not very far away from Spain.
Well, there are all sorts of spin-offs longer term. If more gas means more gas potentially for Europe in the transition period. Solutions will be found. We all know that, both in terms of gas supply and in terms of beefing up renewables, but they're not going to happen in the next few years. We're all exposed until we get the gas situation sorted and stabilized. But yes, you're absolutely right. And Morocco wants to build closer ties with the European Union. I believe they're already an associate member. UK have a very strong trade delegation in Morocco. So looking at in the wider picture, the strategic picture, if we are successful, it opens lots of doors. We know that we will not get all the credit as a company for that, or any of the credit. We don't particularly care about that. All I care about is that we went out there, we found something, and we delivered. And that's all our shareholders ask of us. What happens after that, in terms of the bigger picture, great. We're not going to become like Russia and cut off the gas supply to Morocco and Europe at the wellhead. No. That's not going to happen. And, where we're coming from in terms of spreading the benefits as widely as possible.
The one question I do have to ask you, because you're on the roast, is if you had to choose a Sunday roast, what would it be?
Well, I don't eat a lot of meat now, but probably chicken.
Roast chicken?
Yeah, roast chicken, but not because I'm chicken, but just because it's easier on the digestion, and it means I can get back to work much more quickly.
Okay.
Classic roast, though, isn't it? As well, the chicken. The kids, it's easy.
Parsnip.
Don't forget the stuffing, that's right.
Yeah.
And what about what do they call it in Morocco? The
Tagine.
tagine, a chicken tagine or a lamb tagine.
I do love tagine, and I've had many tagines: vegetable, fish, chicken, lamb, beef. But you don't really want them every day for 2 months whilst you're in the field or whatever. So I tend to vary it. A tagine is very nice. A Moroccan salad is very nice. Moroccan food is very healthy, except for the sweets, of course, which is very highly diabetic. But in general, the food is really high quality, really good advert for the country, and really enjoyable. And the spices are to die for.
Paul Griffiths, Executive Chairman of Predator Oil and Gas, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
It's amazing, isn't it? From not knowing anything about a company about an hour ago, now we feel pretty briefed on what Predator Oil and Gas is all about. What's your summary of that company, do you think?
Summary is Morocco could be monumental in terms of its size. It could be just phenomenal. We didn't really talk numbers in terms of profitability, but wow, it could be massive. The gas is there. I think it seems to be pretty sure that the gas is there. SDX Energy has found the gas in another part of Morocco, and this is another brand new basin that basically they have the whole of. The island thing could also be huge as well, and we didn't really talk about Trinidad and Tobago, but that's another opportunity and another thing. But Morocco is really the main play, and I think if it all works out with this drill, it could be many factors of what it is now.
So what about the rest of the week then? Any standout moments for you in terms of RNSs and movers?
Not really. The market's been pretty slow, hasn't it? And not much volume. I think maybe the Queen's thing has had an impact, but also Federal Reserve situations and the Bank of England raising rates. So, Federal Reserve 0.75, the UK 0.5, I think it was. And, they're estimating that these interest rates are going to go to 4.5% to 5.5%. And, I think it's going to happen. How quickly it happens, it seems in the US going to be very quick. Here, maybe slightly slower. But we will see. Basically, the government's just pumped a lot of cash into the market as well by these tax cuts and stuff. So, that's not going to help inflation in the short term, as we say. That they're trying to dampen demand down by increasing the interest rate, so the demand and supply start to level off, and therefore inflation is then kept to a minimum. But we'll see. There was a good RNS from Contango because it came about because of the podcast. I think we talked about the fact that they've had a lot of potential for thermal coal, which if we'd mentioned a year ago, everyone would have been like, thermal coal? How dare you talk about thermal coal? It's dirty, it's tragic as well. Now we want energy because we want to keep warm this winter. So it looks like they're going to double the amount of revenue that they will get from thermal coal and the metallurgical coal, starting late fourth quarter, early new year. So that's going to make a dramatic difference to that company. It started to rise and came back a bit again, but the potential there is vast. What else, Phil? What have you noticed on the market?
Kibo had a good RNS about the waste to energy plant in Southport, so your stomping ground, and that's 12 megawatts. So it's going to be biomethane and obviously heat as another byproduct, and also electricity as well. So it looked good to me. We did talk to Louis, and there will be a podcast coming out next week. And that just looks like that with their plastic waste to energy project in Gauteng in South Africa, and also their cell cube stuff. It looks like there's a lot of things coming out of this, and for a market cap under, I think it's about 3.5-4 million quid. It's cheap, isn't it?
Well, market cap's around 5.1 million. Okay, but the reality of that situation is they hold 61% of mass energy developments.
Yeah.
MED. So the 61% of Massed Energy Developments currently is worth £4.7 million of that 5.1 million market cap. So basically the three projects you've just talked about are currently valued at 400,000. So that doesn't make any sense. You know, if what we're looking at is that each megawatt was going to be valued at around £500,000, because that's basically how we've looked at it, and even Mast is still massively undervalued, but anyway, that's another story. You're looking at the 10 to 12 megawatts in Southport. That's £5 million, you know, if it's £500,000 per megawatt. And actually £500,000 is a bit low, I think, because it's basically between £500,000 and 650,000 per megawatt. And it's green because it's biomass and all that sort of stuff, getting rid of waste. So, and that also doesn't include the coal assets that they have, that you'll hear probably on the interview coming out early next week as well from Kibu that we've already done. Just waiting on approval of it. That you know, they're still looking to dispose of those. And are they going to be worth more now that, you know, thermal coal is $450 a ton than a year ago when it was $120 a ton? You know, for sure. So yeah, there's big possibilities there. I think this is really one under the radar that people need to get wise about, because within 18 to 24 months, I see this company being like a utility company, just generating electricity and power and whatever. So it's going to be interesting. So
there's a couple of other RNSs, mainly appointments of managing director or directors. BSF saw one, an interesting one, I think, of business director, which is all good news. Could hopefully see some news from them over the coming weeks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to my first fillet steak from those boys.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an interesting technology, isn't it? Lab grown meat, yeah, should be
lab grown meat, and you know, two business opportunities there with the opportunity to obviously grow the meat, but also the feed stuff that they've got patents on and stuff that will for sure generate income and revenue. So it's pretty exciting, that one. I think it could be one out of nowhere. When you see the valuations of some of these meat developing companies in the US, it's absolutely ridiculous what valuation people are putting on that particular company at the moment.
Yeah, Technology Minerals appointed a group managing director. That was Recyclers actually appointed the group managing director.
That's right, Recyclers too. They currently own 49% of. Yeah, no, I mean, Tech Minerals is just sitting there, and it's at this moment producing the boxes to bring back the lithium-ion batteries to be dismantled safely. That business alone is worth much more than the current market capitalization. Plus, it has all the projects of different mining situation, cobalt, lithium, and on top of that, then you've got these factories who are going to then be, you know, taking the batteries and recycling. How it's worth what it is now, I have absolutely no idea. Yeah. And people again just don't understand what's involved here, I think. Yeah, it has been delays, granted, but you know, the current market capitalization doesn't make.
There always is, isn't there, when there's bureaucracy and you know, authorities and regulatory hurdles to overcome and approvals, permit approval. Talking of permit approval, Ben had the permit approved for the second high wall miner on Thursday, which was great to see.
Yeah, we interviewed Adam, and you know, he was talking about second high wall miner within a number of weeks. Then 2 shifts on both of them, and then a third high wall miner is a possibility as well. More about the benches than the high wall miner itself, because they obviously have the high wall miner. So yeah, I mean, again, the company is now in a position where it's I think starting to use its own cash to change the fleet, so that the fleet will be in its own name, which is obviously going to reduce the cost. So you've got 2 things happening there, which is going to reduce cost per tonnage and increase profitability significantly. You've got the economies of scale and the fact that there's going to be a lot more coal being produced going forward, and you've also got the lower cost threshold, because now they're going to own their own equipment, and that's obviously significantly cheaper. As he said, £100,000 deposit, and you could basically have most of the stuff that you need. But they've gone all in and all out to buy it, I think, outright. So, yeah, I think he also stated in the podcast, and they're aiming for 1 million tons next year. They've got the underground and possibly 2 to 3 high wall miners, and they've got the permit now for 5 years to go to a much more extensive area in Ben's Creek itself. Trains are rocking in for 3 to 4 every month at the minute, and that's going to start increasing as the production levels increase. So I think it's actually a real safe one now, to be honest with you. Everything is in place, and we should see good upside from here. We've seen £1, and at 1 million tons, even on a fairly low margin, you're talking about a company that should be worth £600-700 million, and we're currently worth 130 million. So yeah, dividends are coming as well. So yeah, everything looks set. Like before, everything wasn't set, and it was over £1. And granted, the coal price was much higher, but it's now in a not completely, but a very de-risked position. So if you want one for paying a dividend and paying, just growing, then I think it's a great bet from this point.
Yeah. And there's also, obviously, we had a good chat with Colin Bird at Extract Resources this week. And there should be a podcast, as you alluded to earlier, that should be coming out imminently. So what are your thoughts on that after our conversations?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm actually sort of quite relieved that they didn't just decide, okay, we'll just keep drilling. I mean, he's done 35,000 meters already.
38,000, I think he alluded to.
38,000, was it? I mean,
which is unbelievable. Yeah.
For a small miner, this is like, wow. So I'm personally very, very pleased that they've said, okay, that's enough. We don't need to go and drill all the other ones. Let's get this Bushranger project and say to ourselves, right, we're going to have a decision here. And yeah, in the not too distant future, he was talking about, decision to mine, but they've still got things to do before that happens. But
sure,
when that happens, then it's going to force the hand of other individuals in the companies, and then they'll have something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get too wrapped up in that, but I think for a company that's got a market cap of circa £28 million and is pouring gold at quite a large rate, I think it was around 12 kilograms a month. That is how can this company be, for a gold producer, it seems like a pretty low market cap to me.
Yeah, I mean, without any doubt whatsoever, this is undervalued. Forget about the rest of it.
From the fair bride alone, you'd imagine that I know they own something like 23% of that project, the Manica project, but ultimately from those gold pours, which has been online as Colin alluded to for around 2 or 3 months, it's some good revenues coming in. It's good money coming into the coffers.
Yeah, absolutely. Colin said in 2023 he's never been more confident that the copper price is going to really escalate, and who knows whether he's right or wrong, but the fact is, even at these levels, these companies are looking very, very good. If the copper price starts to do what people are thinking it's going to do, then here we go. It's going to be quite interesting. Yeah, and as we've said, the pound continues to drop.
37-year low.
Yeah, so it's not good news for people who are importing stuff into the UK, because obviously it's importing inflation. But actually, for exporters from the UK, it's very good news. But all of the input costs are going to be going up if it costs us more with our pound to buy the things. So yeah, we will see. The economy is a moving target, isn't it? At the minute, I still think the US dollar is massively overvalued, has been for a long time, but it continues to go up. So what can we say?
On that cheery note, I think we'll wrap it up for the week and say goodbyes, and I'll catch up with you next week.
Yep, all the best.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.